Nāgārjuna. Nāgārjuna, circa 150 to circa 250 CE, is widely considered one of the most important Buddhist philosophers. Along with his disciple Āryadeva, he is considered to be the founder of the Madhyamaka school of Mahāyāna Buddhism. Nāgārjuna is also credited with developing the philosophy of the Prajñāpāramitā sūtras and, in some sources, with having revealed these scriptures in the world, having recovered them from the nāgas, water spirits often depicted in the form of serpent-like humans. Furthermore, he is traditionally supposed to have written several treatises on rasayana as well as serving a term as the head of Nālandā. History. Very little is reliably known of the life of Nāgārjuna, since the surviving accounts were written in Chinese and Tibetan centuries after his death. According to some accounts, Nāgārjuna was originally from South India. Some scholars believe that Nāgārjuna was an advisor to a king of the Satavahana dynasty. Archaeological evidence at Amaravati indicates that if this is true, the king may have been Yajnasri Satakarni, who ruled between 167 and 196 CE. On the basis of this association, Nāgārjuna is conventionally placed at around 150 to 250 CE. According to a 4th/5th century biography translated by Kumarājiva, Nāgārjuna was born into a Brahmin family in Vidarbha, a region of Maharashtra, and later became a Buddhist. Some sources claim that in his later years, Nāgārjuna lived on the mountain of Sriparvata near the city that would later be called Nāgārjunakonda, Hill of Nāgārjuna. The ruins of Nāgārjunakonda are located in Guntur district, Andhra Pradesh. The Kataka and Bhasrutiya Nikayas are known to have had monasteries in Nāgārjunakonda. The archaeological finds at Nāgārjunakonda have not resulted in any evidence that the site was associated with Nāgārjuna. The name Nāgārjunakonda dates from the medieval period, and the 3rd-4th century inscriptions found at the site make it clear that it was known as Vijayapura in the ancient period. Works. There exist a number of influential texts attributed to Nāgārjuna though, as there are many pseudepigrapha attributed to him, lively controversy exists over which are his authentic works. Madhyamaka. The Madhyamaka is Nāgārjuna's best-known work. It is not only a grand commentary on the Buddha's discourse to Kakayana, the only discourse cited by name, but also a detailed and careful analysis of most of the important discourses included in the Nikayas and the Agamas, especially those of the Adhikavagga of the Sutta Nipata. In the Madhyamaka, experienced phenomena are empty, sunya. This did not mean that they are not experienced and, therefore, non-existent, only that they are devoid of a permanent and eternal substance, svabhava, because, like a dream, they are mere projections of human consciousness. Since these imaginary fictions are experienced, they are not mere names, Prajñāpāramitā. Major attributed works. According to David Seifert Rug, the Madhyamaka Shastra Studi attributed to Candrakirti, circa 600, circa 650, refers to 8 texts by Nāgārjuna. According to one view, that of Christian Lindner, the works definitely written by Nāgārjuna are. The Tibetan historian Buston considers the first 6 to be the main treatises of Nāgārjuna. This is called the Yukshi corpus, Rikschogs, while according to Taranatha only the first 5 are the works of Nāgārjuna. Trv Morty considers Ratnavali, Praditya Samutpada and Sutra Samukaya to be works of Nāgārjuna, as the first 2 are quoted profusely by Candrakirti and the third by Shantideva. Other attributed works. In addition to works mentioned above, several others are attributed to Nāgārjuna. There is an outgoing, lively controversy over which of those works are authentic. Contemporary research suggests that some of these works belong to a significantly later period, either to late 8th or early 9th century CE, and hence cannot be authentic works of Nāgārjuna. Several works considered important in esoteric Buddhism are attributed to Nāgārjuna and his disciples by traditional historians like Taranatha from 17th century Tibet. These historians try to account for chronological difficulties with various theories. For example, a propagation of later writings via mystical revelation. For a useful summary of this tradition, see Wedemeyer 2007. According to Rug, 3 collections of stanzas on the virtues of intelligence and moral conduct ascribed to Nāgārjuna are extant in Tibetan translation: Prajñāsastra Prakarana, Nidasastra Janchuposanabandhu and Niti Sastra Prajñādanda. Other works are extant only in Chinese. One of these is the Xiamen Lun or 12-topic treatise, Dvadasanikaya or Dvadasamukha Sastra, one of the three basic treatises of the Sanlun school, East Asian Madhyamaka. Lintner considers that the Prajñāpāramitā Padesa, Tachitu Lun, Taisho 1509, commentary on the great Prajñāpāramitā, which has been influential in Chinese Buddhism, is not a genuine work of Nāgārjuna. This work is also only attested in a Chinese translation by Āryadeva and is unknown in the Tibetan and Indian traditions. There is much discussion as to whether this is a work of Nāgārjuna, or someone else. Etienne Lamotte, who translated 1/3 of the work into French, felt that it was the work of a North Indian bhikshu of the Sarvastivada school who later became a convert to the Mahāyāna. The Chinese scholar monk Qian Shun felt that it was the work of a South Indian and that Nāgārjuna was quite possibly the author. These two views are not necessarily in opposition, and a South Indian Nāgārjuna could well have studied the northern Sarvastivada. Neither of the two felt that it was composed by Āryadeva, which others have suggested. Other attributed works include Philosophy. From studying his writings, it is clear that Nāgārjuna was conversant with many of the Sravaka philosophies and with the Mahāyāna tradition. However, determining Nāgārjuna's affiliation with a specific Nikaya is difficult, considering much of this material has been lost. If the most commonly accepted attribution of texts, that of Christian Lintner, holds, then he was clearly a Mahāyānist, but his philosophy holds assiduously to the Sravaka Tripitaka, and while he does make explicit references to Mahāyāna texts, he is always careful to stay within the parameters set out by the Sravaka canon. Nāgārjuna may have arrived at his positions from a desire to achieve a consistent exegesis of the Buddha's doctrine as recorded in the Agamas. In the eyes of Nāgārjuna, the Buddha was not merely a forerunner, but the very founder of the Madhyamaka system. David Kalupahana sees Nāgārjuna as a successor to Moggaliputtatissa in being a champion of the middle way and a reviver of the original philosophical ideals of the Buddha. Nāgārjuna assumes a knowledge of the definitions of the 16 categories as given in the Nyaya Sutras, the chief text of the Hindu Nyaya school, and wrote a treatise on the Brahmanas where he reduced the syllogism of 5 members into one of 3. In the Vigrahavyavartani Karika, Nāgārjuna criticizes the Nyaya theory of Brahmanas, means of knowledge. Nāgārjuna was fully acquainted with the classical Hindu philosophies of Samkhya and even the Vaishaka. Because of the high degree of similarity between Nāgārjuna's philosophy and Pyrrhonism, particularly the surviving works of Sextus Empiricus Thomas Machiavelli suspects that Nāgārjuna was influenced by Greek Pyrrhonist texts imported into India. Pyrrho of Elis, circa 360–circa 270 BCE, who is usually credited with founding this school of skeptical philosophy, was himself influenced by Indian philosophy, when he traveled to India with Alexander the Great's army and studied with the Gymnosophists. Sunyata. Nāgārjuna's major thematic focus is the concept of sunyata, translated into English as emptiness, which brings together other key Buddhist doctrines, particularly in Atman not self and Pratityasamutpada dependent origination, to refute the metaphysics of some of his contemporaries. For Nāgārjuna, as for the Buddha in the early texts, it is not merely sentient beings that are selfless or non-substantial. All phenomena, dhammas, are without any svabhava, literally own being, self-nature, or inherent existence, and thus without any underlying essence. They are empty of being independently existent, thus the heterodox theories of svabhava circulating at the time were refuted on the basis of the doctrines of early Buddhism. This is so because all things arise always dependently, not by their own power, but by depending on conditions leading to their coming into existence, as opposed to being. Nāgārjuna means by real any entity which has a nature of its own, svabhava, which is not produced by causes, akritaka, which is not dependent on anything else, paritranarabiksha. Chapter 24 verse 14 of the Madhyamaka provides one of Nāgārjuna's most famous quotations on emptiness and co-arising. As part of his analysis of the emptiness of phenomena in the Madhyamaka, Nāgārjuna critiques svabhava in several different concepts. He discusses the problems of positing any sort of inherent essence to causation, movement, change and personal identity. Nāgārjuna makes use of the Indian logical tool of the tetralemma to attack any essentialist conceptions. Nāgārjuna's logical analysis is based on 4 basic propositions. To say that all things are empty is to deny any kind of ontological foundation, therefore Nāgārjuna's view is often seen as a kind of ontological anti-foundationalism or a metaphysical anti-realism. Understanding the nature of the emptiness of phenomena is simply a means to an end, which is nirvana. Thus Nāgārjuna's philosophical project is ultimately a soteriological one meant to correct our everyday cognitive processes which mistakenly posit svabhava on the flow of experience. Some scholars such as Fyodor Sherbatskoy and T.R.V. Morty held that Nāgārjuna was the inventor of the shunyata doctrine. However, more recent work by scholars such as Chung Moon Keat, Yin Shun and Dhammayoti Taro has argued that Nāgārjuna was not an innovator by putting forth this theory, but that, in the words of Shi Huifeng, the connection between emptiness and dependent origination is not an innovation or creation of Nāgārjuna. Two truths. Nāgārjuna was also instrumental in the development of the two truths doctrine, which claims that there are two levels of truth in Buddhist teaching, the ultimate truth, Paramarthasatya, and the conventional or superficial truth, Samurtasatya. The ultimate truth to Nāgārjuna is the truth that everything is empty of essence. This includes emptiness itself, the emptiness of emptiness. While some, Morty, 1955, have interpreted this by positing Nāgārjuna as a neo-Kantian and thus making ultimate truth a metaphysical noumenon or an ineffable ultimate that transcends the capacities of discursive reason. Others such as Mark Sideritz and J.L. Garfield have argued that Nāgārjuna's view is that the ultimate truth is that there is no ultimate truth, Sideritz, and that Nāgārjuna is a semantic anti-dualist who posits that there are only conventional truths. Hence, according to Garfield, in articulating this notion in the Madhyamaka, Nāgārjuna drew on an early source in the Kakinagata Sutta, which distinguishes definitive meaning, nithartha, from interpretable meaning, nyartha. The version linked to is the one found in the Nikayas, and is slightly different from the one found in the Samyuktagama. Both contain the concept of teaching via the middle between the extremes of existence and non-existence. Nāgārjuna does not make reference to everything when he quotes the agamic text in his Madhyamaka. Causality. J.L. Garfield describes that Nāgārjuna approached causality from the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination. Nāgārjuna distinguished two dependent origination views in a causal process, that which causes effects and that which causes conditions. This is predicated in the two-truth doctrine, as conventional truth and ultimate truth held together, in which both are empty in existence. The distinction between effects and conditions is controversial. In Nāgārjuna's approach, cause means an event or state that has power to bring an effect. Conditions refer to proliferating causes that bring a further event, state or process, without a metaphysical commitment to an occult connection between explaining and explanans. He argues non-existent causes and various existing conditions. The argument draws from unreal causal power. Things conventional exist and are ultimately non-existent to rest in the middle way in both causal existence and non-existence as casual emptiness within the Madhyamaka doctrine. Although seeming strange to Westerners, this is seen as an attack on a reified view of causality. Relativity. Nāgārjuna also taught the idea of relativity. In the Ratnavali, he gives the example that shortness exists only in relation to the idea of length. The determination of a thing or object is only possible in relation to other things or objects, especially by way of contrast. He held that the relationship between the ideas of short and long is not due to intrinsic nature, svabhava. This idea is also found in the Pali Nikayas and Chinese Agamas, in which the idea of relativity is expressed similarly. That which is the element of light is seen to exist on account of darkness. That which is the element of good is seen to exist on account of bad, that which is the element of space is seen to exist on account of form. Iconography. Nāgārjuna is often depicted in composite form comprising human and Naga characteristics. Often the Naga aspect forms a canopy crowning and shielding his human head. The notion of the Naga is found throughout Indian religious culture, and typically signifies an intelligent serpent or dragon, who is responsible for the rains, lakes and other bodies of water. In Buddhism, it is a synonym for a realized arhat, or wise person in general. Realized arhat, or wise person in general. Realized arhat